Good morning, Annie. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good, good.
I thought maybe we could begin, Colin, with you just introducing yourself, although I'm sure most people know who you are and what you do. But
Yeah,
if you could
hello.
just tell us a little bit about your responsibilities and maybe about the fabric and all that stuff for anybody who's not aware.
Absolutely. That's absolutely fine. So, hello, everybody. My name is Colin Bannon. I'm the CTO for BT Business. I support both the international and the UK parts of our enterprise um, customers. And that includes government, health, defense, security, small to medium business, large enterprise, and global multinationals. And it's a real honor with my role. And the sort of services that we serve on our international wing, we're in over about 180 countries around the world that we serve. And in the UK, we serve upwards of 30 million customers. A little bit more info is in our networks, we run over 100 exabytes worth of data through our core each year. And we run national critical infrastructures, everything from supporting air traffic control to emergency services through to taking over 44 million nine, nine 999 calls. I was going to say 911 calls, but I need to get the right country that we're supporting. And 44 million calls to our operators who support that, as well as we have other call desks that support things like United Nations High Commission for Refugees, supporting refugee calls around the world, through to logistics, through to banking and the trading that runs on it, through to the airlines that run on the air controls, through to transit as well. So we're very, very conscious of the responsibility of helping our customers go through digital transformation and protecting them, but at the same time, putting operational resilience at number one at the top, because there really is no plan B without the network these days.
So I really like, I know we're going to come on to resilience, but I really, when I interviewed you, I don't know, 18 months ago, maybe, we started by you saying that every minute somewhere in the world, somebody puts a backhoe through a telecoms cable, which really made me laugh.
Yeah.
As, I mean, it's true, but
Yeah.
we talk about very high level technology often, and yet, something that basic. Well, of course, it can cause chaos if you haven't got a good plan in place. And I
Yeah, we've managed to virtualize pretty much everything, but a backhoe we haven't virtualized yet.
know if only. Um, okay, so we'll come to resilience, I think, in a little while, and how we've had to rethink that in a very changed operational landscape. But maybe because of the title of what we're looking at, the challenges and gains of operating an end-to-end digital infrastructure. Maybe we can start by exploring a little bit why the end-to-end digitalization is so very important.
Sure, absolutely. I think I'm going to pick a couple of lenses on this very quickly to go through. Um, let's just look at the customer experience for a minute. When parts of our customers, our very important customers, they're delivering uh, billions of pounds worth of benefit each day to their board and benefits to their customers. And they're facing a number of different challenges, obviously, growing tech debt, uh, a geopolitical environment that is more volatile than we've seen in many, many years, a persistent, um, sophisticated, growing cyber threat that is not going away. If anything, it's getting more and more aggressive. And as you can see, just about any day you look at a headline, there's another major brand who's in the front page about how they've been attacked. And then you also have greater pressures on reducing both capex and opex costs within their own environment. And just the velocity of technology change is faster also than we've ever seen. So you put all those pressures on a modern CIO, and of course, one of the tools in the bags for them is digitalizing their IT and technology infrastructure environment so that it is more automated and more agile. And so then sort of extend that out to their supply chain, folks like us and other parts of the supply chain. So they started, most of our customers these days have fully digitalized their front end. They're not just turning up to a high street bank anymore. They have the mobile banking apps. They have their web apps. They have, well, it's probably an out of date omni-channel, whether it could be in certain regions, it's actually in other apps, the sort of fintech environment where there'll be other channels, whether it be Snapchat or WhatsApp or email. There are many different ways that customers are wanting to interface. And that agility is important to be able to serve all of those channels in the way that their customers want to consume them. So then they go to their supply chain and say, I want to digitalize, because before it was sort of manual, many touch points, lots of humans in every step. And they went through a digitalization, and a lot of their apps, they moved to cloud or cloud-based, microservices-based compute. And that evolved very quickly over a number of years in the past. And if you think about the experience on that part of the end-to-end journey, now you can go to cloud, you can onboard within a few minutes, you can procure, purchase, and spin up additional compute and capabilities on demand in a there's a liquidity of that resource pool, so that if you have a campaign or a spike in your usage, you can burst up and burst down. And there's greater sophistication within the buyers on how they buy, things that are deterministic and that are stable. They may use private compute or their own data centers, things that are volatile, that need liquidity in the capacity. It may be public cloud. So it's not a cloud first everything. I think you see much more sophistication in buyers. So you see a much more distributed set of workloads. However, that part of their digital transformation is now safe to say fully digitally automated, fully agile. And then it comes to the telcos. And then it's maybe you reach out to your account manager, say, I'd like a price for some more bandwidth. You might wait a couple of weeks. They'll go away. They'll go work on systems offline. They'll come back with a quote. Then you'll say, oh, well, I want to go for it. I'll put a change order in. And then you put the change order in and you wait 6 weeks to 6 months for that to come. And if you think about your end-to-end and you start to have volatility in your demand profiles and volatility in your business, and you don't want to over subscribe and overpay just for your highest peak. You want to be able to be burstable and control your OpEx. And then you got this piece of your supply chain that's just living in 2005 rather than 2030.
I'd say
And
that's maybe generous, actually.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. And that just sort of illustrates why the telecom partners, telecommunication providers, need to radically transform and they're to be much more agile, much less human touch. And if you look at the journey that we've done with our various fabric transformations, the concept of a lights out exchange where you don't have to send in a human being to unplug a customer from one NTE on one rack and then go up the stairs and fish some cables up and plug it in another. If you're doing that 3,000 times, invariably, statistically, there'll be human error as well. So that impacts the operational efficiency, because in the past, telcos had built their stacks, built their products organically over many years at different times on completely different technology stacks. And today it's a physical cease and reprovision, whereas the reimagining of what we've done in BT and others is, we went all into transforming, fully digitalizing our back end, where you don't need to send somebody in there. You've abstracted the concept of the port with the protocols, and the protocols, you have this software-defined underlay now that you can spin up whatever the service you need without sending a human in there, and that you have a fully digitalized front end, and you take that 6 months and make it 6 seconds or 6 minutes, and that's the sort of speed in the call. But you've got to do it perfectly, perfectly predictable, compelling commercials, and operational resilience and security first at the same time, because there's one thing that telecommunication providers generally tend to still have is trust with their customers, because they're providing such important services, and for sure we would never want to lose that while we're providing these services.
Okay, so really the telcos need to emulate what's going on elsewhere. It's no point customers trying to be agile and then hitting a brick wall when it comes to their telecoms.
Yeah, so you streamline a fully digital end-to-end service, both within the telco, but within the full customer supply
Yeah.
chain. And that also means, as an industry, becoming more open, collaborating better, exposing APIs, adopting standards, so that if you're transiting across multiple countries and multiple telcos, uh, the way you treat the intent of that traffic becomes transparent, and that we become better at collaborating with cloud providers, better at collaborating with private compute providers and SaaS and applications, but also better at collaborating with each other.
Okay. So I think that was a really good description of why it's so important. But another thing that we know is that it's really hard to do because operators have been trying for a very long time. The thing we always like to hear about, really, because we're human, are the pitfalls. And have you got anything you can tell us there from your considerable experience, Colin?
Well, sure. I'll just pick a few. I've got lots. We don't have all day. Look, a couple of things. I think it's not just about technology when you change the paradigm of digitalization within a telco. Let me give you an example on the front end with the portfolio itself. If you think about those stovepipe portfolios, you had product managers. It can be a deeply uncomfortable process for people change and culture in this environment where, let's face it, BT is the oldest telco in the world. It's arguably, I think it's about 197 years old or 200 years old, depending on which date you use. But we're trying to think like a startup at the same time. So you have this rich history and immense capital investment and a deep set of technologies that you're trying to transform. But at the front end, the portfolio people, those stovepipes that you used to own, where you went from individual products that were built every 10 years or every 5 years, those product managers used to love it because they'd own their own boxes, they'd own their own P&L, and they'd have control, and they could go at the speed that they wanted. They didn't have to share with anybody else. It's kind of like they had their own houses and they could paint it whatever color they wanted. But now you're moving to a virtualized environment where there's layers of common platforms, that you're moving from products to platforms. You have to start sharing. So you're moving to a condo now, and there's rules in that condo. You can't paint it any color, and you sometimes have to wait for certain capabilities like heat and water and power. But at the same time, you get far better unit economics. And at the same time, in an organization, you're not duplicating. Scale matters hugely on this. So what we're really trying to do is drive common platforms where there is much more volume on those platforms, because the more you do something, the better you're at. So you get better skilled teams doing that. But at the same time, that means giving up control. And that in for example is a deeply uncomfortable, and that's one of the pitfalls that actually, if I was to rewind the clock, I would spend a lot more time up front getting everybody's head and mindset in the culture of letting go, from that side. The second one, and I'll just do a couple. The second one I would say is skills, and getting the skills mix right. from this perspective because uh, uh, there are a lot of transformational skills. The protocols have stayed the same for the last 30 years, but you're adding additional layers of abstraction on top of each other. And I think some of the skills areas that we really realized that we didn't have enough of and we needed to double down is the sort of microservices based developmental thinking, where you're not necessarily logging on with a command line. You know, we in our new platform, we don't let our engineers log on to a PE router and make a change directly anymore. You've got layers of abstraction, and you need to think software rather. So you're moving from an operations mentality, both in the and into a sort of a NetSec DevOps. So there are boxes, two different boxes that used to do something. Now that it's one box. You've got different disciplines. So the skills levels of someone who used to be exclusively networks or exclusively security, more and more we need these gestalt hybrid skill sets because that end-to-end automation is more tied together and you need to think a lot more about upstream and downstream. So we're kind of squeezing our skills and making them broader from that perspective, but still keeping the depth. And that's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it requires a lot of investment, and it requires a lot of goodwill from people who want to make the transformation into the next generation of how you program. And it is very much a mix of skills. It's making the development team in the back end much more connected with what the front end and the customer's needs and outcomes are. And it's safe to say that any telco right now would be facing a skills challenge to both transform their existing skills and perhaps bring more new talent in. But that sort of talent is very much in demand right now. So the market is quite hot. So I would I would recommend anybody who's just getting into this business is think about modern developmental languages in relation to telecommunications, but still with a really good foundation of networking and security. You will end up crafting yourself to be a perfect candidate for someone like myself who would be really interested in having a conversation.
It's really funny. I was talking to someone from a standards body about 3 weeks ago, and this person said to me that a lot of people like working in silos.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really ever connected silos and mentality together. I'd always thought about it was data being sort of marooned in silos rather than actually it's also what a lot of people like is to be in charge of their own little domain.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think there's just an organizational pressure when you get to large scale organizations. The received wisdom of management discipline over the last, I don't know, 15 years was to have small teams that were deeply, highly specialized. But as you start to connect things up into single platforms, all of a sudden that doesn't work so well. And you need much more hybrid skill sets who are thinking a lot broader, but you still need the depth. And that creates tension in your
And it's
organizational
quite,
design.
yeah, it's a big ask, isn't it, to go wider and deeper all in the same go, really.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, given just some of the challenges we've talked about so far, the thinking would be the benefits of digitalization are huge. Um, but I think it was McKinsey who reckoned, I might be wrong, that generally revenues for telcos are going to grow to 1% to 2% this year, which doesn't seem a lot of reward for all that effort. But I'm just wondering if you could outline some of the main benefits you see from this end-to-end digital infrastructure and maybe give us some examples of it in action.
Well, look, I give you a couple ones. Yeah. What do our customers? So let's just look at the human element. What do our customers value? They value from our human part of our business, the advisor, the TDA, the account manager, the service manager, the person who's there on the customer's side, in the trenches with the customer, feeling the customer's pain, fighting the customer's battle with them and for them. That's what they really value from BT, is where we've really got their back. These credible, deeply experienced, talented, caring industry experts who understand their industry, understand their language, whether it be pharma or banking or whatever. Those are highly valued and highly sticky for our commercial relationship for our customers. What they may not value is the other 20,000 people who are manually rekeying from one system to another system that they never see, they never meet. And those people, because they're humans, invariably, statistically, if you're doing 100,000 reentries, at some point, they'll get it wrong. Now, that part, what we really like to do, and what we've seen is the digital transformation, is reduce the people intensity for those very low value, you're just using humans as data buses from that side. Now, however, there's a couple of other areas that come out of that and it probably falls in our previous section, which is pitfalls, is when you automate all these steps. Now, the good thing about those humans is, yes, they made a few mistakes, but often they were also correcting. There were data filters at each point. So as you string it all together into a single flow now, oh, hey, hang on a sec, we needed to get our data correct up at the front end. And so clean data all the way through, taking the humans out, means that your inventory needs to be super, super clean and super quality. So that is another premise. But from a benefit perspective, what allows us to do is improve our unit economics for our customers, because they're always asking for a greater challenge. Improve the actual speed, because with some automation, you can reduce a lead to cash timescale, not just by hours, but by days or weeks. And by that automation, you end up with delighting the customer and better outcomes. But that people intensity also allows you to move people from low value add functions to allow you to retrain them, or shift the skills mix so that there are more people facing the customer in the areas that they actually do value. And that's one of the biggest benefits, and probably one of the highest callings of a telco transformation, is move people from relatively non-value add functions that could be automated and repivot them to functions that the customers really place a true value on, around this sort of consultative, how do you achieve an outcome? How do you envision? How do you create a roadmap? How do you become more strategic? That's where we need to go and do more, and we're already in the process of doing. And it's one of the things that is, I find, the most rewarding, is that sort of transformation.
Sorry about the guest appearances. Okay. What lessons have you learned from becoming digital, striving to become digital from end to end? I'm just wondering if there was any unexpected outcomes, good or bad.
Well, I just mentioned about the probably not surprising requirement on ensuring your data model is clean. I think one of the ones that we've really, as we digitalized, where you may have the netco and the digico, sort of the legacy platforms and the new platforms. When you're in mid-transformation, it's very tempting to launch a product early, or get the product out on time with compromises. So in other words, oh yeah, but there's just this one step we haven't fully automated yet. Let's put people in back and do it the old way. And of course, getting back to the premise of a clean data model, invariably, if you allow manual changes on that point, you risk injecting, because it's a clean room, the new environment. And when it's fully automated, it stays clean. But as you allow people to touch that data model in the process, if you make compromises during launch processes, and to say, oh, for a month, we'll just let people to do manual entries on that part of the process, you risk actually corrupting that database. And so one of the most interesting things that we've managed as we're getting to launch and launched a few things now, which is really getting exciting with our new portfolio area, is holding the line and managing the tension between a purist and pragmatism and commerciality to ensure that your new platform, as opposed to a set of products that had lots of manual bits, actually gets launched hermetically sealed and fully ready, so that it delivers maximum value for all of your customers. And I think that's one of the most interesting learnings as I'm sort of towards the tail end of the first wave of portfolio launches is some of these trade-offs that you make as a leader in a telecommunications organization, getting this new transformation out.
Now, I once asked the CTO a couple of years ago of another large European telco that if he could go back, wind the clock back and do things differently, what he'd do differently. And he said he'd spend a lot more time getting the data model right in the first place.
Yeah.
And he'd really underestimated, I think, the amount of effort, but also the critical importance and exactly what you've described, that how much, if you don't clean it all, the ramifications of, you undo a lot of the good you did potentially.
Yeah, I think for me, if I could go back in time, I'd just start 3 years earlier, because the market really, I'm sure everybody would say that, but the market, if you think about it, the products that we built and designed and we're launching, we designed them in a world when we were thinking of highly distributed workloads. We were thinking about early days about sovereignty. The fact that you could geofence the internet and think about, we just saying, well, maybe in the future, people will start to care about sovereignty. Well, guess what? They really care about it now. And guess what? Maybe they'll start thinking about data in motion, not just data at rest. So all of these things we built into our products at the start. However, we didn't realize AI would come along. And so that's driven it, put it on super steroids, and now it's kind of a shut up and take my money moment to get an AI ready network in place, and that's why I would have loved to start just a little earlier, because it's really getting an interesting world right now.
Okay, so Colin, we've got a question from the audience who's asking, and this kind of ties to AI and also the next question that I was going to ask, which is about what your next steps are. So Nick is asking, could you tell us more about the global fabric concept and how it will operate for BT international customers? Now you're a separate, and now they are a separate unit. I'm not sure about the separate unit. That's all got a bit messy, I think. But anyway.
So let me speak to the technology, which I'm qualified to speak to. If you think about the fabric concept in itself, what is it? So we had 4 different cores, arguably 5 different cores internationally. We had ELAN, E-line, Internet, MPLS, and also a media and broadcast core. We were using sometimes separate subsea cables. We were definitely using different stacks. We may have been using the same hardware, but they were on different racks in different parts of exchanges around the world. And invariably, technology has an end-of-life challenge. You had different parts dealing with end of life. We saw a real need from our customers to have hybrid products. Also on this stack, there is the concept of DDoS. And further in the roadmap is the ability to spin up virtual overlay services, whether that be SSE, SD-WAN, SASE, at the head end. So that's essentially a compute platform that sits behind the PE routers of the telco. Now, all of those were on different stacks. I alluded to some of the challenges that we had previously. The new platform, from an energy efficiency, uses 76% less electricity. It has 10 to 100x worth of new performance, and it makes it seamless and easy to change between your portfolio. The port is sticky for the lifetime of the customer, and you can add multiple services fully digitally without humans getting in the way, without people unplugging things, without having to wait for somebody to get access to something in the middle of the night. And that really transforms the way we can serve our customers. That is one. The second one is we wanted to design it from the cloud back out. And so it is the largest, most interconnected cloud fabric in the world that we've designed. And not only is it empirically the best, in other words, the most numbers of touch points that we're building, but also qualitatively the best, where we are working with each of the hyperscalers to differentiate the services that we're doing in terms of closed loop automation, where they can see trouble on their side of the network, we can actually switch things over. The investment that we've made in, for instance, I'll give you an example, dual um, dual resilient, diverse interconnection points in each availability zone, so that if you have a failure on the hyperscaler's side or at the CNF's location in one, you don't have to, your resilience project, which is most people today, you fail out of the country, out of the zone, and then you have to come back in via another zone. Now you can have immediate failover in a single zone. So what that works out to be is, and this is an argument that I've made a long time, is we had a thesis that slow is the new down, right? And so we
Yeah.
really wanted to make sure that, yes, people's SLAs and contracts saying, well, the network is still up, but yeah, actually you've just added 150 milliseconds round trip delay, because now, rather than, because your link in Japan to, say, Azure One has gone down in Japan, and now you have to go all the way down to Singapore, land in this Singapore Azure, come back on Azure's backbone, go to Japan, then trombone all the way back down to Singapore, and then back up to Japan. That's not a failure mode. Yeah, yes, technically on your contract, you could still say you're up. But from an experiential, that's a brownout. That is down to me. And we wanted to make sure that we designed a higher quality network that is beyond the nines, so that you have modern experience that is cloud-based from that front as well. So hopefully that gives you an example on that as well. Modern commercials. Previously, our salespeople used to love a lock-in. 5-year contract, you get a big ICV, you get a great bonus. Well, modern network as a service means that you don't have that lock-in. You can pay as you go. You can burst up, you can burst back down. You're not locked in. You get sort of cloud-like flexibility on your economics, but with the telco trust and operational resilience and high availability. And so you're blending the best of the new plus the trust that you always had to really reimagine something that is new. And it's something that we're super excited. And then, of course, the final point I'll say that is different is, previously on a telco network, every node in a telco network, well, first of all, the core of the telco networks, if you look at most telcos around the world, they're a black box. And what people and technologies have tried to do is compensate for that with a thing called SD-WAN. And the SD-WAN has some brilliant capabilities where it can choose the path by monitoring the application's process. But it really only has control over the first hop. And then it goes into a telco's black box core for the next 26 hops, and it spits out at the other side. And most telcos, the cores were fundamentally ignorant of that traffic or that customer's need or their context or their business intent, other than perhaps a tagging on the MPLS was the closest equivalent. And each node, in the traditional way, each node would calculate the next forward path based on a restrictive set of rules. Now, in this new network as a service, we've abstracted the control plane from the data plane. So the path controllers are abstracted now. And with those central sort of AI brain controlled path controllers, we've created a language that is exposed, that opens up and shines a light on the core, the telco, that allows business intent to be injected into that black box, so that you can do all sorts of things that we could never do as a telco before, whether that be, say, take two really important data flows and ensure that they have disjoint paths through the mesh globally, And so that they never touch, a bit like Ghostbusters, so the two lines never cross each other. So you have full resilience paths through there, lowest costs, lowest latency, fastest reconverge. But then new things that we never could do, because and you can't do with SD-WAN is, well, what happens if I have some sovereign data in a country, and I have a sovereign user and I have a sovereign data center, but it's over the internet. And the problem with the internet, well, the beauty of the internet, it is self-healing. The problem with it, it was designed to survive a nuclear war, but it is fundamentally ignorant of geography. And so we see examples on the internet every day where between a local user and a local data center, where there's failures within the internet, as you said, Annie, there's cuts all the time. When you reconverge and it heals itself, it may be healing itself via another country, because there's a physicality of how all these meshes are connected up. And we see traffic going from Germany via Russia back to Germany. And that's not a great look certainly towards the regulators in these days. And so creating a new language, a new paradigm, a new control level at the underlay is the gold standard, because the overlay could not control this. You were at the mercy of your ISPs that were underneath you. So the underlay now is we've made it so that it is like software defined for every hop. So you can inject your business intent, and you can actually now do no-flight zones. So you can ensure your packets never go via that country, or you can ensure that your data in motion stays sovereign and stays inside a country. And then you can now, we've seen actually regulation blocks of countries. We've seen regulation to say communities of interests. So you could slice the network via certain vertical industries, pharma or banking, or you could see traffic flows that actually need to stay within a state. I even saw a city actually make some rulings around this as well. So you're going to see this micro segmentation, and that's really the final point I'll say about the fabric redesign that we've done. Is if you think about what did you have in the data center before AI came and cloud came, is what was great about data centers? Well, you had great micro segmentation east-west. You could segment up traffic and protect it. You had pretty much infinite bandwidth. You could scale it up. You had great control because everything was controlled from a system, and you had great visibility. And normally it was quite quick to be able to make those changes. And then you get to the WAN where it's just pieces of string really originally. Now, our thesis is now that the wide area network, as you start to connect up these AI nodes together, agentic, highly distributed mixes between public, private, on-prem, and in the devices, that sort of agent-to-agent discussion or flows between public and private, it's very, very complex, and it's getting more and more complex every day. And so therefore, there's a lot more east-west traffic. And so our thesis is that the WAN is the new data center LAN, and that the wide area network, the network itself, is now part of the computer. And so therefore, that was one of the fundamental reimaginings of how do you get that control in your wide area network to essentially be, that's where the name fabric came from originally. It was you had your data center fabric, and now you have your wide area network fabric. And all those principles that came from the data center have been extended out into the wide area network. And it's an incredibly exciting time in telecommunications. And I'm very privileged to be part of the sort of trailblazing work that BT is doing to reimagine what networking will look like for the next 20 years.
You're the person who submitted the questions, delighted by your answer, as am I. Colin, I'm very sad to say we've come to the end of our session.